Cool. So yeah, up to this point, you know, we've kind of done a little bit of everything. We really have seen all the pieces for like a simple full stack app, but we haven't quite fully really put them all together. So we know the pieces, and now we need to put them together. And really, there's not much new we're going to do this. It's just by obviously connecting things together, it definitely adds some level of confusion. But just before we get into code, I'm just going to say I think coding is all about breaking up things into smaller problems. I mean, there's nothing that has done this better than like software engineering and coding, because they literally they broke them. They have really, like, if you look down at the very basics of what coding is, it's all like 0 and 1, true or false. So people in the coding world are very good at this skill. So we're going to be building a full stack app today. And the more we can break stuff up into smaller problems, the better. And one thing that is a very clear line, you know, where we can start to break stuff up is like front end and back end. So you can start to think of things that like, oh, that's like React side of things, Rail, or like that's Rails side of things. So how I'm going to start out with this is we're going to do the Rails part first. And hopefully this is, yeah, largely a review, because I don't think there is really nothing new that we're going to do with Rails. So what we're going to do, we're just going to build out we're going to do like a fact website. So this is a place where people can, you know, create facts. So like facts are just going to have like text. That'd be like the fact, like, you know, the earth is flat. That's a fact. You can have stars for whether you like how popular it is. That's going to be a float. We're going to have like a source, which would be kind of like a URL, you know, maybe like here's some proof, and then like a username, like who created this fact. So let's go ahead and create this app. So I'm going to just CD into week 4. If you haven't, you might need to like, you know, make dir week 4, or you can just watch. But get into like our week 4 directory, or a directory where you want to create your Rails project. So yeah, this is just our common steps of starting up a Rails project. So I'm going to do a Rails new. Just call this like React with Rails -Max and Spring 22. So that's my long name of this project. So we're going to be using PostgreSQL as our database for this. And this is going to be an API. And if you are following along, I'm just going to Slack these commands out so they're in Slack. Okay, so I need to, I should have named that something different. CD into that. Okay. So I want to create my database. Let's just do our model stuff first. Well, we can do let's just create our model. So Rails G model. I'm going to call this fact. That's the name of my model. It's going to have text, which is going to be a string. It's going to have stars. It's going to be a float. And if it is a string, I don't need to actually say it's going to be a string, because that will just be the default. So I'm going to have a text column that's going to be a string. I'm going to have stars, which is going to be a float. I'm going to have a source, which will be a string, and a username. So I have a fact model with 4 attributes.
What is the stars?
The stars?
Yeah.
That's like, you know, if you were like on, like, I don't know. How come I can't think of a website that uses stars? Like Amazon. And it was like the rating of the fact.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I could call this rating. It's just going to be like, you know, 0 out of 5. Cool. And that's why that's a float. Maybe we can do some validation with this, you know, that it's a float and that it's, you know, between the values 0 and 5. Cool.
It would also be like the like button, right? On Facebook, or like the heart on Twitter.
Well, what data do you think a like button would be under the hood? I mean, it's kind of
Just a number, right?
yeah, that'd probably be like an integer, like likes integer. This is a float, so yeah, it'd be like that. Cool. Let's see here. What do I need to do after I create a model? Or what's definitely one thing I have to do when I create a model? If I want to like test this and see if it's working,
Migrate.
I need to migrate. And what does migrating do?
Kind of like pushes it up in the database, so it's created. I guess that's a way to describe it.
Yeah, that's close. That's I think more accurately said is so I have a migration file. Like this is the migration file that we that was created when we ran that command. By running Rails DB Migrate, it's going to run this migration, which is going to create our table in the database. It's going to create the facts table. So migrations can also be used to like update this table, delete this table, add columns to it, rename columns. So migrations are really ways to kind of maintain our database, like not like the data in our database, but like the structure of our database. So for now, I can just do a Rails DB migrate, and that creates tables facts. So now I have a facts table. So now I could like step into my console and, you know, I can do like a fact.create. Give it some text. 1 equals. That is a fact. Stars is. And yeah, I'm going to just skip the source and username. Why is this is actually true? Who knows why this is true?
Is it because you didn't use the triple equals?
I mean, it wouldn't be true in JavaScript.
That's a binary thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that you could say this is binary. If I added 1 + 1 in binary, it would equal 2, because that's 2 in binary. Little nerd fact for you. All right. Oh, I should go back in. So now I can have like fact.all. I can, you know, go in and grab that. I could go in and like find that fact.first dot username equals, I don't know, Bob. And then I can do fact. Or sorry, fact. All right. So let me ask you this. This is a little interesting. I did fact.first.username equals Bob. Does this change the username to Bob?
No,
I don't think so.
It does in memory, but it doesn't in the database. So if I did like, let's just say like for like F for the first one equals fact dot first. I do F, that the name is not Bob. If I do F dot username equals Bob, and now I do F, like F's name is Bob. But if I do, fact dot first, that username is nil. So I have this F variable in memory that kind of grabbed this from the database and then created it in memory. But by saying F dot username to Bob, it did not actually save it to my database. I could do F dot save. Now that would actually go in and save F to the database. So now if I did fact dot first, now it is saved to the database. Cool. Where would be maybe, so I could populate my database here with data. What did we learn? That was maybe another good place to do this. Just to have some dummy data in our database.
This seeds folder or the seeds file.
Yeah, in the seeds file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Slack this out. I just have some like just dummy data, so we can go into our seeds file. So, and I can go in and paste that from Slack. I might also, I didn't have this in the Slack, but maybe just so I know every time I run my seeds, I can like go in and destroy all of them.
And then on line 19, you have to, and 10, you have to change that to hashtags, right?
Oh, here I need to, yeah, comment that out because that will be an error.
Line 10 too?
No, that's a puts. So that's valid because I'm in a Ruby file. So this puts should work. And yeah, this should have been, this was more like instruction in terminal Rails DB seed. And then this is the message we should see.
All right.
Because we're grabbing fact.all.size. And then we're going to destroy all of them at the beginning. Let me just, I'm going to delete this in Slack and give you the right one. So now I can go into my terminal and do a Rails DB seed. It looks like I have a syntax error. Syntax error, line 10. Oh, that is not a valid comment. So my JavaScript comments with Ruby comments. So I needed on 10 to switch that to a hashtag. All right. Let me ask you this question. If I do a fact.all.size, what is that going to be?
It should be 6 because you already, oh, well, no, you're going to destroy it all first, so it'll be 5.
Yeah, I had an error. So one of the things, and this is not really, this is just a coding thing and like learning how to read code and being like, code is very much top to bottom, it executes. So sometimes like a syntax error sometimes code will run up to a point and sometimes it won't even run. So I guess what I'm asking, did this start to run and get right here? Like, so did this line right here, 8 run? And then we got to line 10 and then it broke. And then so none of these would run, or did it just not even run?
I think line 8 would run.
Line 8 would run. Yeah, I don't think that's like a bad guess. But one way we could tell is we could step it, because I do have one fact in my database before I ran that. So I could do like a fact.all. So this did not run. This just, when it didn't even like try to run it, it says, hey, that's a syntax error.
Okay.
So that didn't work. Let's remove this and just do like seeds. And let's run this now. Rels db seed. So unlocal variable or undefined method seed. So it's a different error. It's not a syntax error. It's like this undefined method. I step into my console, back.all. See, that one did run, because this like is valid Ruby. Like it's syntactically correct. So it was able to go through, run this line of code, and then it got here, and it's like, wait, seeds is undefined. I don't know what that is. So then I stop. So if I comment that out, and you know what it should have been. So that's just something to kind of like, as you're coding, as you're learning to code, you know, you can ask yourself kind of those kind of things like, was this like syntax errors are generally just like not going to run your code. They're just like your code doesn't even run, but you'll have other errors that do run, and then they get to a certain line and then they break, and then it just stops right there. So now I run my seeds file, fact size is 5. Cool. Yeah, let's do, just as a demo, let's just do a validation. So we're still just working in our model. So I'm going to go to my app, models, fact.rb. Let's do a validation. So validations are pretty, you can kind of validate anything. So I want to validate if this number, like I want to see if my stars is in between 0 and 5. So one way you can do this is you can just like Google, like see if number, you know, in rels is between value. So, because there's like, you can kind of think there's like maybe unlimited validations that you might want to do that are very specific. So you can kind of look at, you know, go to Stack Overflows, maybe go to their, you know, what am I saying? Go look at their documentation. So do you think like this one, what do you think is kind of a little wrong with like something like this, with what we want? I mean, let's look at this one, because I'm looking at that part in particular. Only integer. Like include number, like these are close. They're giving me like, I don't know. Let's just try this one.
What was the question though? What do you want validated?
I want to see, okay, so let's do this. I'm going to add a validation, because I want to see if my number is like in 0 and 5. So if I now go to like, so there's my validation, and I don't want to do number, I want to do stars. Like I want to make sure if someone gives me stars, it's, you know, 0 or 5. Like it shouldn't be in like 6 or -1 or like a string. So now I can go step into like my rels C, and I can do like a fact.create. So let's do stars, you know, like 6. See, that didn't create because it doesn't have an ID. Stars is 5. That does create. 4.5, that creates, 0, that creates, negative 0.1, that doesn't create.
So it did work.
Yeah, so that worked. I was a little confused. Like I didn't know if that was going to include, floats or not, but that did. So there's like a validation. So now, I can say, hey, my stars has to be in, a number. And this is also nice because it also does like, if I don't even put stars, like it kind of is making stars required too. Like stars has to be required now.
Oh, so I was gonna ask, but that kind of answered my question. So you don't have to put a presence true on that because it already requires stars now.
Yeah. But like there is, now this is kind of weird. It's letting me do a string. So I might need to do like another one, like, because maybe it's thinking that like it might be doing some conversion because it's kind of saying like stars is 0.0 if I give it a string. So some like reason it's converting that string to 0. So I could add like another like validates. I think it's, I don't know how to spell this word, numericality. I don't know how, that's such, I can't even say that word. But there's like a way to validate it to see if it's a number. I just need to Google it to like spell it. There it is. So I could come in and like, if I really want that to be a number, then I could say validate stars, numerality. I'm not even gonna try to say that. Is it a number? So now I can come in and do like a fact dot create stars. That's still setting it to 0, but it's not saving to the database. So cool. Now, so this whole time, what we've been doing, we've just been working with the model. We created the model, we created a seeds file, we added a validation. But once again, this is a way I'm even taking that Rails app, the backend portion, and breaking it up into like its own little part. Oh, let's just work on, doing stuff with the model. Like setting up data to our database, adding validation. And now I feel pretty good with our model as far as this app goes. Here. I should have done this at the start, just as a habit. Should have just committed. Do commit. Okay. So yeah, we have our model kind of set up. I might need to want to go in later, add more validations or add more stuff, but I think this is good for now.
Hey, I have a sort of a quick UI question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm noticing when I put certain things into my code, they don't highlight quite the same as yours. Do you have like some sort of,
like the colors are different?
like an add-on or something? Yeah, so like my numericality doesn't highlight blue, my stars doesn't highlight blue, but it's not giving me errors at the same time I'm typing it the same way. It's just, it doesn't look the same when I type it out, you know what I mean?
Do you have Prettier installed or a different type of extension?
I don't think Prettier works on this, on Ruby. I'm not sure. Maybe it's Prettier.
Okay.
Maybe I have a language selected. It might just be your theme in VS Code.
Okay.
It might be Prettier. Since it has that slash through it, I don't know if it's actually working. But so now that that is done, now I can go in and if I was doing this like on a README, just kind of steps, It's kind of like document our steps. So we first, there would be like, you know, the Rails portion. You know, where we want to create, like, here's our Rails portion. Like if I'm doing like a little list, like let's create Rails app. Let's create models, you know, seed database. And we could do like create controller. Controller, I'll do like these, like, you know, models, because we could have many of these. Create controllers. We could add routes in routes.rb and then fill out controllers. You know, test with Postman. Right, that's kind of like a loose kind of step of, you know, high level steps of, well, here's our Rails app. Well, let's break that down into little tasks. You know, create the Rails app, create the models, seed the database, create the controllers, add the routes, fill out controllers, and test. Like that's essentially, you know, for basic Rails stuff, that's essentially it. So let's go create our controllers. So for this is just going to be a Rails controller or Rails G controller API / facts. Let's make that plural. Cool. Sweet. So let's go do our routes. So we have our.
Would you need to migrate that after you did that?
I don't need, so this didn't create an, doing a controller doesn't create a migration file. It's only our models.
Okay.
You can actually create, you can do a Rails G migration and create a migration folder, but we're not going to get into that yet. Maybe we'll do that after the hackathon. So I do my namespace. I could just do this and be done. But let's just do a little review of this like morning quiz. So I'm going to want to do out like, this would be like the quiz. Hey, instead of cars, it's now let's do all this for facts. So I'm going to do a get request to facts. This should take me to my facts controller to the index method. So I'm saying, hey, when I get a get request to facts as this server, let's go to the facts controller to the index method. And, you know, in the index method, I'm going to use my facts model to grab all of the facts, and then we're going to return that back as JSON. Okay, then we're going to have a get. I'm going to be able to handle this get facts :ID. So someone gives me a get request to facts / and then they pass me whatever. I'm going to take that request to the facts controller to the show method. And in the show method, they're going to have this params ID, which, you know, if they should be the ID of the thing they want me to find. If they give me a bad ID that's not in my database, I'm going to give them back a 404 error because I wasn't able to find it in the database. And it's the client who gave me a bad URL. So I'm going to blame them. Okay. I could do a post to facts. If someone gives me a post request to facts, I'm going to take that to the facts create method. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to expect the client send me params this fact is going to have this fact param, and then there's going to be, I'm going to allow what was it, username, text, stars, This is, this needs to be 0 through 5. And source. Like the person who's sending me, who's doing this post request to fax, they need to give me their data like this, and the stars has to be there, and it has to be 0 through 5. If it's not, I'm going to give them back a 422 error, and I'm not going to create it to the database. So I'm going to do a puts to /fax. That's going to go to fax. This is kind of, does the stars need to be there for a put request?
No, but it needs to have an ID.
Yes.
We do fact ID.
Yeah, sorry. This one needs an ID in the URL because I need to know which fact to update. So this one, how I'd say this, they don't have to give me stars, but if they do, if stars given, it has to be 0 through 5. So if they're sending me data that has this stars attribute, it does have to be 0 through 5, but it doesn't have to be there. If they just want to, they could just update the username or the text. Does that make sense? Like here with my create, they have to give me the stars attribute and it has to be 0 through 5, or it won't create. With this one, it's just like, if they want to update stars, it has to be 0 through 5. Cool. And then we have a delete request, fax ID. So if I get a delete to this URL, I'm going to take them to, or take this request to the fax destroy method. And I'm going to use this params ID to find the fact and destroy it. And then I'll send them back the fact that was destroyed. So that's like when I was having you do that little quiz. That's kind of like what I want you. It's not that you can just write these out because we can just do that really quick with this. It's more importantly that in your head, and maybe try rubber ducking this, like to explain what is happening.
Your put request should be fax #update, not create.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that should be update. Cool. So there's that.
Are you missing the colon?
Am I missing? Oh, yep. Thank you. I'm missing a colon on all of these. If I go open up Postman now, what error am I going to get if I try hitting these routes? So that's not the right one, Postman. I do a localhost 3001 API fax, and let's do a GET request.
We don't have a server running.
Cool. That was a little bit of a trick question there. Yeah, I don't have my server running. So let's do that. Okay. So now what error am I going to get? Or am I going to get an error? It's always a valid question too. Because this is saying, hey, go to the fax controller to the index method. Have I done anything in my controller?
Yeah, you're gonna get a 404, right?
Let's see. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm actually wondering, is it gonna, I think it's gonna be a 404. So it's a 404 not found. And the specific error is the action index could not be found. So it gets the request, it knows what to do with it. And it's like, hey, this index could not be found. It's kind of a weird 404 because this is really like the back end is screwing up, but it's giving back the 404 because it cannot find this index method. What if I comment this out?
It'll be the show.
This is another 404, but now it's saying, hey, there's no route that matches. So it's like the route's not defined. So it's still a 404, but like it gets the request and it doesn't know it. It doesn't have anything defined for it. What if I spell this with an X, fax? What error is this going to be?
Should still be a 404, right?
404. And you don't have to like say the error, like what is Rails going to say, but what is this going to try to do? And maybe this will help you kind of think what the error is going to be.
It's gonna try to go to another controller called FAXTS, right?
Yeah, so it's going to go to this. It's going to try to go find a fax controller with an X, and that doesn't exist. We never created that controller. So I get this there, like the uninitialized constant API fax controller with an X. And it even gives me a hint. Oh, wait, that's pretty close to the fax controller. Is that what you meant? But these are all 404, but they're a little different. They're all different in what's causing it. So there we go. There's my fax. Cool. So there's my index method. So let's go ahead and in my index, let's just go to my fax controller. Let's go fill all these out. So I'm gonna have my index. And I feel like this should also be like, something you could throw inside of here, some comments. This is a get API fax. I come here, render JSON at all. Okay. If we get a get API fax :ID, this is our show. And so I want to find my fact equals fact dot find params :ID. And I'm using this params :ID because that's what I named it in my routes file. And if in my routes file I named that IDX, then that would be params IDX. We're sticking with convention, and we're just going to leave that at ID. Now I should put this into its own little method, right, to find this fact, because we're going to do this a couple times. So I call this set fact, and instead of doing this here, I'm going to do this down here. So I want to make this an instance variable. So now I can have that defined here. So I can do render JSON at fact. And now I need to make sure I call this method before this action. So before action set fact. I only want to do this now on the show method. But eventually I'm going to want to do it on update and destroy. So I could do my destroy really quick because it's pretty close to my get one to my show. So I just call this destroy, and that's fact dot destroy. And this is just going to be a delete API fax. As I'm doing these, what do you think I should be doing?
Checking
if they work.
Yeah, because I'm writing all of this code and I'm not really testing it. This could be what's like a form of technical debt. Like it's a very minor form of it, but it's kind of this idea, like I'm kind of, doing all this work, is it working? I might be creating bugs and bugs within bugs. The sooner I can find these bugs, the better. So
So
might
doing
take-
that is considered debugging.
Debugging is the process of just going through and fixing errors. So I don't know if I have any bugs right now because I haven't tested. So yeah, if I come through, this is more like I'm now testing. If we're getting technical, that works. If there was if I come in and it doesn't work, now I'm kind of like debugging. It's like, what? I don't have this undefined. I'm getting a 500 error. Okay. Check my server. That's line 5. Oh, line 5. Oh, it's not alt. It's alt. So I go in, I fix my bug. I test it. It's working. So it's kind of like debugging and testing, kind of hand in hand for you when you're doing your homework. So the earlier that you test, the quicker you find your bugs, the easier it's going to be to debug. Kind of like when sometimes I'll see, people just have, 80 lines of code in like one of their files. And I can like see some errors. I'll be like, I know they haven't tried it once. It's like, why are you writing so much code without testing? Like, small amounts and then test. So let's go test our show method. API facts. Let's try to see if we can grab the one with 2. Cool. That works. Let's test our delete method. That works because if I try to delete that again, I can't find it. Cool. So now those are working. Let's do our def create. All right. Let's do fact equals, fact.new. I'm going to create a method called fact params that is going to sanitize my parameters from the client. So let's go ahead and define that. So I'm going to use my params object here to make sure that, the fact key is there. And then I'm going to permit username source. Sorry, that needs to be stars and text. So when I was kind of defining my routes and I was commenting this out and kind of talking in my head out loud, the client needs to send me, this data. I want this fact that has username, text, stars, and source. If they don't, it's not going to work.
I have a quick question about that.
Yeah.
Say you like code all of that, you have a full stack app, and then you want to go in and add like a like button or something. Would you just have to go back into your back end and front end and fix that everywhere you do this?
Yeah, and let's maybe talk about that because that might pop up. So 2 ways to do that. The first way is you go into your migration file and you let's say I just want to add like foo here. Foo is whatever, and it's a string. So I've changed my migration file. Now running Rails DB Migrate, it's looking at the timestamp. It knows it's already run this migration. So it's not going to run it again for this table. What I could do is I could do a Rails DB. And another way I can kind of see that this didn't work is I can go into my schema. And in my schema, I don't have that foo in there. So it didn't work. So what I could do is I could do a Rails DB reset. I'm trying to think the reset. Nope, the reset doesn't even do it. So this one, I might have to just do the full on Rails DB drop, DB create, DB migrate. And there it is. So I guess, yeah, with this one, if you want to, can change it, you change it here in your migration. And then you run the Rails DB reset. Or sorry, the Rails DB drop. You actually have to go through and manually say drop, create, migrate, seed. And then it's there. And that's going to work for you. Like that's one way you can do it. You can just go and edit your migration file and add it. Now, what is the big downside to this? What am I actually doing when I'm dropping or even resetting my database?
That changes everything in it. Right, that deletes everything.
You're like erasing all the old data. Yeah.
It deletes everything in my database. Now,
All the users, all the posts.
yeah. So if I have like an app that's running, I can't just do a Rails DB drop, and drop my database to add the like column, right? Or whatever foo. So this is why we kind of have migrations, is so we can add columns to, like, we can change our database without changing the data. So another way I could do this is I could add a migration. So I could do a Rails G migration. And there's kind of like weird naming to this. Like you can, if you name it right, it'll like generate it for you. So let's say I want to like add, BAM to what is our facts. And I'm adding this BAM, and that's going to be a string. I've seeded my database. I have 5 things in there. I don't want to like destroy any of those things. Now I have 2. I have this migration and I have this other migration. So this was generated for me. I could come in here and, change this before I run it. But I have this new migration file. What do you think this does? It adds column to the facts table, this column name BAM, and it's a string. So I don't have BAM in my schema yet, but I do have this migration that was just created. So now I can do a Rails DB migrate. It runs that, it sees, oh, hey, I have a new migration file. Let's run it. And now I have BAM in my table. And it didn't destroy any of my data. Now, all of the data that was in there, all of the facts that were in there beforehand, BAM is now going to be null. Like they're going to have a null value, but they're there. So is that, there's like, I don't want to get too much into migrations, but that's like, I know you might, in your homework, you might want to update things in your models and maybe not just have to destroy your models. So those are the 2 ways you can do it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Cool. So let's go back to our facts controller. Let's do our create. And then, like I would want to, if I wanted to add those, then I need to like say, hey, now we can add BAM and foo. But I'm not going to, because I'm going to delete those eventually. All right, so for my create, I'm going to create a new fact in memory, and then I'm going to try to save it. So if fact dot save, else end, go inside of here, then we want to render. If it was successful, let's just go ahead and render JSON. Let's give them back the fact. If not, I want to have this like do a 404 error. So I'm going to render JSON errors. fact.errors.full messages, just to give them something to work with. Let them know why it failed. And then here, yeah, the status, it's going to be 422. So let's go in and test this one out. So we added this fact param sanitizer and our create method. So that's going to be a post request API facts. And if I just send this without any data, oh, I don't have my server running. Start our server. So here it's saying, hey, this is a 400 error. This is a bad, it's not the 422, it's a 400 error. This params.require is actually giving us back a 400 error because I don't have fact in my params. So fact is missing. So when I send this, I need to send it, a fact param. So I'm going to do fact name. Let's send this. So now I'm not getting that error. Now I'm getting a 422 error. And it's that error, hey, stars is not included in the list and stars is not a number. Okay, so I could do this as stars. Send that. Still a 422 error. And I could make sure this isn't a number. It's not included in the list. Remember, that's between 4 and 5. There we go. I might want to add some validation on these other fields, but we don't have to for now. So I can do facts. Let's do text, fact Joe, and then like a fact username. Go send that up. Looks like it's working. Cool. So now the update method is going to be very similar. I can just pretty much copy and paste this and change a couple things. So this is going to be update. I don't need to create a new fact in memory. I just need to grab the fact from the params that I'm doing in my before action, and then call the update method on that and give it the sanitizer method. And then, yeah, here I want to do, this is now my instance variable, I now need to make all these facts or fact, the at fact. Cool. So now I change this to a put. I need to give it an actual facts ID in the URL. That's how that's going to match. And then, we can go in and try to change this to like 4.3. And that looks like that's working. I don't need to give it a stars value. This is what I was saying earlier, it will change it. But if I do give it a stars value and it's not within my range, then it won't let me update it. Cool. So I have now, like if I go back to this little short README, I've kind of done all this, right? So my Rails portion that's essentially done. Add git commit -m be basic done. I really wasn't thinking too much about like React. I mean, I was kind of thinking, I did have this kind of middle piece where, I'm expecting to get this stuff eventually from a client, and, did test it with a client, Postman. But now I feel pretty confident that my back end is kind of good to go for this lecture or for this homework. And yeah, the Rails portion, I don't know if once you get familiar, like that was pretty straightforward, right? Especially with just one model. When we get to the React side, this gets a little more challenging. 'Cause it's a little harder just to like lay out the steps in React. Because there's a little more variation depending on how we want to do stuff. But let's take a break. I'm going to create a repo for this. I'm also going to hop off and hop back on so I can push this up to YouTube. Does anyone need any of this code?
My update's not working, but I can't figure out why.
Cool. Yeah, if you want to take a break, hop off, come back at 11:05, and then yeah, let's go. We can debug your. Let me hop off. I'm just going to hop off really quick and then hop back on, and we can look at your update.